time. That's our official start time. So we're going to go ahead and begin. I want to thank you all for taking time out to meet with us today. My name is Anthony Adorno with DeGarmo, and today we have our first Talent Leader Forum. We're very excited for it. For those of you who are unfamiliar with what the forum is, it's a bi-monthly peer-to-peer event with a national audience that you can join from the comfort of your home or office. Our goal is to share tips, strategies, best practices on a variety of different topics. We see this as a great opportunity to network and to continue to build relationships with your peers in the OPO community. And the format of these events is going to vary, based on our topic and the way that we want to approach it. And of course, we're going to solicit your feedback for future topics. And so our next event will be in April, every other month. On the off months is when we host our FSC forums. We had that last month and had real good experience there. So again, the format is going to vary. Today, we're going with a case study format, which is going to allow our speakers to deep dive a little bit more on their experiences with our topic. I'm going to encourage you all to use the Q&A dialog box during the session. There's a chat and there's the Q&A. The Q&A is where we're going to pull additional questions, so things that you want to ask of Kim or Cameron or both, and they will field them at the end. So the kind of the order of operations, I'm going to introduce this topic a little bit, and then we're going to turn it over to our speakers, who are each going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes kind of talking about their experience. And then once they've both had an opportunity to share that information with you is when we'll transition to the Q&A. So we're not going to do it after each speaker. We're just going to do it at the end to make sure that we get as much information covered as we can. So for today's topic, transforming donor and family advocacy, this really came out of as an offshoot of some of the research that we wrapped up with many of you all who are here. I think we've got over 40 OPOs on this call we're excited about. And one of the things that came out of that research, when we looked at the data, if for those of you who participated and were a part of those report outs at the end, that there seemed to emerge two different success profiles. One that was aligned more with family advocacy, which is very compassionate and empathetic and relationship building with the families. And then there was another that seemed to be a better fit from a donation advocacy perspective. So people who were able to influence and inspire families to get to yes on donation authorization. And so, and I know for a lot of OPOs, this topic that we're going to discuss started well before the research that we did. But I think the data that we found just kind of reinforced some theories that there may be some value in the potential of splitting these roles and having people placed into the roles based on their best fit. So based on the attributes that are their personal strengths. Dividing those roles and responsibilities for an overall greater result. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're lucky to be joined by two folks who have had experience with this transformation at different levels, and they're going to share that with you. So I want to welcome first Kim Gillespie from LifeShare Network. Kim's the Director of Hospital Development and Family Services. In Oklahoma. She joined LifeShare back in 2014 as a hospital liaison, and now leads the teams that are responsible for helping to develop the donation programs in the hospitals across the state of Oklahoma, as well as the team that has donation conversations and supports families during the donation process. Her main inspiration comes from her mother that lived an additional 15 years because of the gift of organ donation, which is just incredible. And I'd also like to welcome Cameron Dovalina. Cameron started his healthcare career as a paramedic, working in both EMS and firefighting, but quickly learned that he loved taking care of patients much more than putting out fires. And as a result, he transitioned out of the EMS role into early and late phase pharmaceutical research, specializing in chronic kidney disease and dialysis. He got his first opportunity working in organ donation with TOSA. There he had the opportunity to manage both the clinical and family services teams. More recently, he spent the last 3 years at Donor Connect in Utah, again with the family services and clinical teams in his service line. And Cameron's also finishing his last semester of his MBA at Auburn. And so congratulations to you on that achievement, Cameron. So one of the things that's really important to understand before I turn it over to our speakers and allow them to share their experiences is that because of their different backgrounds and their connection to the OPO industry, they're going to have different perspectives on this issue. But more importantly is these organizations are in very different places on the continuum of transformation. And so you're going to hear kind of diverse perspectives based on what they've learned to this date for their OPOs, and that's going to be very different. So again, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers in just a minute. I'll remind you, use the Q&A dialog box, and we tried to reserve a significant block of time so that you all can get the additional information that you can walk away with. That's really actionable. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kim and allow her to take the floor and share her experience in this space. So Kim?
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate DeGarmo giving me the opportunity to talk about this today. It's something we are still in transition, but hopefully I can share some things with you that will help you if you decide to go this route as well. So as Anthony said, my name is Kim Gillespie. I work at LifeShare Oklahoma as Director of Hospital Development and Family Services. Our staff is divided up, our family services and kind of our approachers or who have the conversations with families. We have in-house coordinators that are at our major 4 hospitals in Oklahoma. We have family service coordinators and really divided up into the 2 metros in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. Our IHC job duties prior to splitting this role, they worked the referrals in their hospitals. They had donation conversations with families. They started the case until our organ recovery coordinator got there and really walked the family through the entire process. And then we had family service coordinators that also did referrals, did the donation conversations, and then also did family support as well. Our family service coordinators are 10 to 12 shifts a month, and they do the 24-hour call shift. So they are on call for 24 hours. And so really looking at this, Clint Hostetler, our COO here at LifeShare, and I had started talking about how to get the right people in front of the family at the right time. And how to do this, we looked at kind of a scoring system. I talked with our manager at the time, Sarah, and really looked at, okay, how to determine, is this the right person to put in front of this family? And could we keep track and score? And we really were starting to kind of look at that, and it was pretty complex. And so we heard about the DeGarmo study, and we're just really excited to participate and see if it could help us in this, trying to really dig into the FSC role and determine if we could change that somehow to serve our families better and serve the organization. And so after we got our survey results, it really made sense to divide the group into 2 groups, requesters and family support. And we really didn't know what we would call each role or what we would do. We met with each individual, we reviewed their results, and we really tried to let them decide what group they felt fit them better along with the DeGarmo results. There was a lot of discussion. There was a little pushing in with some individuals on what we thought would be better fit for them. And there was a little pushback with some individuals on them telling us what position they thought was better. And so ultimately we put the groups into 2, requester role and support role. We started in September and we wanted to do a 3-month trial and really, excuse me, to look at, we're a data-driven organization. So we really wanted to have the data behind us for our results so that we could see, does this work? Does this make sense for our group? So at first, all the groups were really excited. We discussed that we'd have several check-ins throughout the period. We got a lot of like, is this really a trial? Are we really trialing this? Or are you guys just making us like think that we're doing a trial, but you're really going to make this change? We did get a few like, oh, great, I never have to approach a family again, or I don't have to do overnight referrals. So there was a lot of that kind of absolutes that we tried to get rid of right from the beginning because we wanted to help create that team atmosphere. So we started the trial in September. It was a great first month. The first weekend, of course, anytime you try something new, we went live and someone had 4 donation conversations in one day. And she was on the very next day and had donation conversations that day. And she came into my office and was like, I'm tired. Like, I don't know if this is going to work. And so tried to talk through that. We did work on having any like family support, try to do a registered conversation, especially if we didn't perceive any family pushback. We tried to prioritize the families and conversations to have the right person in front of that family at the right time. One thing, family support really loved being able to be with the families more. They really loved being able to support them instead of just being at the bedside 1 hour before OR. A lot of times they were able to be there 3 or 4 hours before OR and really be able to support that family, what they're going through, prepare them for OR, also help the organ recovery staff with huddles. And so we did see a benefit on that side as well. We did have meetings throughout the trial with our COO, with the family services manager and myself. And really one of the main things we heard is we need more staff. We can't do this, with dividing up into the 2 positions, we need more staff. They also kept trying to put parameters around how many conversations could they have in a day. If they got to 3 conversations a day, could they tap out? So we really had to talk through that. We didn't put a parameter on it because in talking with Clint, I said, as soon as we put a parameter and a limit, the next day we're going to need them to do one more than that. You guys know how donation is. You know how you can't prepare for the conversations and the number of conversations you're going to have. And so we really tried to stay away from that and really turned it more into having a conversation with staff, checking in with them, seeing how they are, seeing if they needed to tap out or if somebody else could go and support them. We have typically about 50 conversations a month. So that equals about 1.5 a day on average. We did have throughout the trial, we had more conversations with the requester group than the family support group. And that's something I wish we would have done different. I wish we would have had as many conversations with family support. And it's not that their job really changed much, but I think just to make them feel like they were as important as the requesters, to offer support and get more feedback. We just didn't have as many conversations with family support. And that's something I wish we would have done differently. During really when towards the end of the trial, we started seeing the results. We developed new job descriptions. We didn't take anything out of either. We just really changed the focus on what their responsibilities would be. We did incorporate some of the DeGarmo work styles into their JDs. We really liked a lot of the language from their study and really the strengths of a requester, and really tried to incorporate that into our job description. And what we did, we came up with a position called family support or family service coordinators and then donation advocates. So the donation advocate are the ones that are having the conversations with families, and then the family service coordinators were our family support. We did get them regraded. We made decisions on pay. And after the 3 months, we had meetings with both teams and got feedback. Some of the feedback we got, they wanted to preserve themselves for conversations. So sometimes during their workday, if they knew they had a conversation coming up and there was another one that popped up out of nowhere, they didn't want to do that conversation because they were preserving themselves for the next one. Or if they did the first one, they didn't want to have to do the second one. Again, we had the how many conversations is max in a day. And we really had some pushback with the donation advocates on saying that they don't want to, that family support piece, they didn't want that taken away. So really trying to talk to the staff about that and seeing what that looks like on the other side. But then we gave them the results. And from our 3-month trial, we did 75 approaches by requesters, 33 approaches by our support, our IHCs, managers, or a trainer. So the majority of the approaches were by requesters. One market, we did have to fill some shifts for the DA role with the family support just to cover the schedule, just because of some vacations that were already approved and such. And during our trial, our authorization rates for requesters, our brain dead was, and this is non-registered rates. We only measure our non-registered. We do pursue first person authorization every time in Oklahoma. So our requester authorization rates, brain dead was 61%. DCD was actually 65%, which was great. And then our combined was 63. Our support auth rates, our brain dead was 60, our DCD was 50, and our combined was 53. And just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea, before trial, our auth rates for brain dead were 77, our DCD were 49, and our combined were 57. So it really took our DCD rate from 49 to 65% just by having the DA role request more often for DCDs and for our conversations overall. We did see a little bit of a dip in our brain dead authorization rates during that trial, but as you all know, they kind of, you'll see dips and peaks and valleys throughout. And so I can let you know our rate at the end here so far year to date as well. So we have seen that pick back up. We did have conversations with each staff member after the trial. What position did they want to stay in? We got some feedback. They didn't know if it was worth it. Two of our donation advocates said, I think I might want to stay in family services or family support. We ultimately let it be their decision. And at the end of it, everyone stayed where they were during the trial. So where the position that we put them in and what DeGarmo said was best for them is where they ended up staying. Lessons learned. On the other side of it, we can talk about these now. We did pump up the donation advocates quite a bit and tell them like, you're where donation starts. If we don't get the yes, we don't get anywhere. And really kind of created a bit of a sense of entitlement. And some had an expectation for a much higher pay rate, which was not how it ended up being when we had everything graded. So in hindsight, I would have had the JDs done before the trial, but we didn't do that on purpose because we wanted to be able to adjust them if needed throughout the trial. And if we needed to change things, we wanted to be able to do that. So I don't know if that's a lesson learned or just kind of a on the other side of it, something that you just have to kind of walk through with the staff. Dividing the teams did kind of create a divide between the group with the in-house coordinators, the family service coordinators, and the donation advocates. There was a lot of focus of whose job is this, who should approach, who should support the family, who's got referrals. And I don't know that we could have prevented it. I just didn't expect it. So it's one thing I didn't expect to come out of it that we had to work through with the staff. And then another thing we didn't think about we did not change like the goals for the family support staff. Authorizations is something we've always put on their annual goals. It's been a main part of their merit score. And so we're talking through now, is that something we want to leave on theirs, even though their frequency is going to be a lot lower than it has been in the past? And a lot of the staff are like, it was so easy to know where I was or how I was doing in this job prior to, because I could look at my authorization rate. And so for family support, looking at different ways where we can measure their performance and be able to give them feedback in real time. We do surveys for aftercare and for families, but we just don't get a ton of feedback. I think maybe 10%, and just the timeliness of it isn't being able to give that staff feedback in real time. So our current metrics as we're continuing to look at and address the two different positions. Our current DA, their authorization rates year to date, brain dead are 77%, DCD are 61%, and combined we're at 65%. So ultimately, we're thrilled with the progress of the donation advocates and where their authorization rates are. We are continuing to look at the percentage of requests done by donation advocates and really looking at authorization rates by the total group, by both groups individual. There are some in-house coordinators that have a very high score with DeGarmo, and they could be a donation advocate, but they wanted to stay in their in-house coordinator role. And so we try to use those in-house coordinators as a backup to approach or to those donation conversations when we can. We are moving forward with using DeGarmo in our recruiting. We have the applicant really go through a phone screening first with our employee experience team. From that, if they get through that, then we automatically send them the DeGarmo assessment. And then depending on their score, we either decline the candidate or we do our interview. It has made the process very streamlined for us. We have had a little bit of feedback. We've had some internal candidates or employee referrals that everybody thought would be great. And then because they didn't score high enough in DeGarmo, we didn't move forward. So there's been a little bit of disappointment with that internally, but ultimately the team knows this is the direction we're heading. And I believe everyone's on board and ready to move forward. So, and I believe we'll take questions afterwards. Anything, Anthony, now?
No, thank you so much, Kim. That was great. And it's hard to say what we would have expected. I mean, it's a major organizational transformation, and there are going to be some things that are much more difficult to anticipate and overcome, and a lot of lessons to be learned along the way. And so this is one of the reasons why we think this is great, to just, for those organizations that may be considering this, what to expect. Not everything is going to be really smooth, but you can get there, and maybe with some of the advice and experience that you've shared, they can learn a little bit more about how to do that smoothly. And I'll just remind everybody to use the Q&A dialog box. If you have specific questions, feel free to pass them to us, and we'll present them to Kim and Cameron when we wrap up. So thank you again, Kim. Really do appreciate that. And Cameron, I know you're at a different place in the transformation continuum than Kim is. You guys aren't quite, where LifeShare is, but you've also had a lot of experience kind of dealing with some of these issues in advance of this transformation. So if you don't mind, I'll turn it over to you. And if you can talk a little bit about what's going on with Donor Connect, that'd be great.
Absolutely, Anthony. And thanks again for that kind introduction. And Kim, it's not surprised how far along you guys are with this implementation. I've been super fortunate to collaborate with Kim and Clint on some things, and they are an OPO that identifies a need and makes change. And so I think the goal from our perspective in this talk today is to we're taking a little more of a gradual approach. I think we're working through cultural changes for sure. And we're probably kind of step 1 and 2 into this implementation. I think we've developed some strategies that we've recognized that we need to move forward. But the goal over the next 10 minutes is to kind of just help you guys see kind of how we got there and how we evaluated the DeGarmo research as an organization. And so so again, my name is Cameron Dovalina. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer here at Donor Connect. It's a new role here at Donor Connect. I've been in this role now for almost 4 months, and my service lines are the organ recovery teams, the surgical services teams, the hospital service teams, and the family services teams. So I worked with our family services teams back in Texas. So I'm really excited to have this integration again into my Utah work. So I'm really excited about what we're going to be doing with Donor Connect and DeGarmo moving forward. And so Donor Connect covers all of Utah, southeastern Idaho, southwest Wyoming, and Elko, Nevada. So we're the 4th largest service area, with 80 plus hospitals. And so we're always trying to manage our resources to better suit our hospitals to help to make sure they all feel equally supported and well resourced, and to help support those families. 3 hospitals that have greater than an hour flight from our primary service area are 3 of our biggest donor hospitals. And so, again, trying to manage that and the increased activity that we're seeing and implementing new strategies towards how we approach our families is a big part of the DeGarmo assessment for us as well. So just some recent data from Donor Connect. In 2023, we had 441 approaches, and this resulted in 247 authorizations, and that's a 56% overall authorization rate. And within that, we had 49% registered, and that includes our DCD population. And we started honoring registered DCD donors with the same level of influence as BrainDead back in 2021. And this was a big culture shift for our organization, but it did take us from a 20% DCD rate to greater than 50% DCD rate through 2021 and 2022. And we saw a slight dip in 2023 at 41%, but it did significantly increase our donation rate. So we're really proud to have that 94% registered conversion rate in both BrainDead and DCD. Now, with that in that is a 31% non-registered authorization rate. And so in 2022, we had a 47% non-registered authorization rate. In 2021, a 36%. So we can all quickly identify that that's our area of need right there, is we need to investigate our non-registered authorization rate and our approach to those families to kind of improve that authorization rate. You know, we all know that there's strong approval for organ donation nationally, and just because they're not registered doesn't mean it's not their final intended wishes. And so it's really important for us to explore that. And so looking into DeGarmo's research, we saw a lot of consistencies in our own findings as we were doing our own internal evaluation. So the big question that we asked ourselves, and that I'm sure each of you are asking your own OPOs, is Donor Connect's responsibility to be prioritizing the supporting of our families, or is it to get authorization? And that was a really tough question for us. You know, and as we asked our team this question independently, just through a one-on-ones, it's overwhelming that and not surprised that we heard it's to provide support. You know, it's our primary role is to support these families through that, and then authorization being the second priority. Now, I don't think we disagree that's not a wrong idealization, but I think we need to change a view and work towards altering that prioritization to be in both. And we can all agree that the answer is both. It's our role to support these families, but it's also our responsibility to get authorization. And I feel, looking through DeGarmo's research and looking at our team and those responsibilities, that we can do both of those at the highest level of integrity without any questioning of the prioritization of both. And I think one of the biggest things that we face as an industry is the perception of how hospitals have on how we talk to families. You know, there's a lot of questions and concerns that surround that through the bedside staff. And so these were concerns that obviously that our team had shared with us as we start to make a transition towards kind of equalizing that prioritization for authorization. But we constantly need to remind ourselves, you know, that we're the federally certified organization responsible for increasing the pool of organs to be transplanted. And so we carry that responsibility heavily, and we should view it as an honor to be in front of these families to make those wishes known and to bring those wishes into fruition of donation. And that the FSC team in that skill needs to be valued at the highest level. And I'm not surprised, Kim, that you said your team that was approaching families felt like their merit was higher, you know, because we all know that there's no donation without authorization, you know, and it's a very tough role to be in. And so we needed to value it at the highest level, you know, and our approachers needed to work on their verbal toolbox and to give them the skills to manage those tough conversations, with that goal in the end being authorization. So, and also, again, providing the needed education and resources to help them work through the perceptions which fluctuate nationally, and help them adapt to the challenges that they're seeing, and to adapt to each and every family individually, because we all know that each family needs individual needs. So the DeGarmo assessment helped our coordinators identify their strengths, and it helped us recognize those strengths that they carried. And it looked into analytical thinking, the concern for others, and influence, And it ranks these areas to help identify where we might show little too much of those behaviors. And then you can take those behaviors and implement them into practice. And, in tune, we should see an increase in authorization rate. And that was kind of our goal in taking this approach with the Declarmo. And we can all agree that, evaluating your declines in case review, that a lot of these behaviors do lead to silent biases. And so those need to be managed and educated and growed on. So, and knowing that every decline is led with a concern and being able to address those concerns is crucial to making that educational decision for the family. And so this is something that I experienced in our work in Texas. And I believe my old partners are on this call, but we identified that our FSCs were working through 1 to 2 concerns before actually getting authorization. And so they were putting a sound effort into identifying the concern, educating on it, and then which led to more authorizations, and instead of just ending that conversation too early. And I think DeGarmo's research helped us see that a coordinator with too much empathy and little influence is likely to struggle through those challenging conversations and truly address the concerns and the needs that the family was presenting with them, and then ending those conversations way too early because of the angst of having to work through that with the family. And so those are some areas that we saw that DeGarmo had kind of highlighted, and we saw that in our own team. We saw that in our own practice, and those are things that we want to work on. So just a little bit more into our past and why we're heading in this direction of DeGarmo. I'd say 4 to 5 years ago, Donor Connect went from an organ coordinator, everything model that we're all familiar with, where you talk to families, work up donors, go to the OR. That was slowly transitioned into a blended model where FSCs were added with the intention, like a lot of us did, to transition into an FSC approach model. And you were taking those clinical coordinators away from that area and putting it solely on the FSC. And so we currently have an FSC manager with about 7 family service coordinators that approach and support families. And our previous hiring strategy was similar to probably what you guys experience, where you were targeting social workers, child life workers, and other familiar roles of support. They're strong supportive roles that help support these families through their crisis. And so that was traditionally our target as well. And this target recruitment strategy, though, did limit our talent pool. Being in Salt Lake, we have limited resources. We're not a very large metropolis, and so having those stringent guidelines did limit the pool that we were able to bring in, and it kept us short-handed and short-staffed continuously, and it really made it hard for us to transition to some of the stuff that we're talking about right now in DeGarmo, and being able to split roles and add further roles. So that was an area of a focus for us. And what I'm getting at is kind of had to create that foundation before we started making this transition. We definitely talk about all guns blazing, making some change, but again, it's super crucial that we have those resources to manage that, because nothing worse than making change than having to backtrack, 2 to 3 months later because it went catastrophic. So the changes that we've made, in 2023, we started heavily participating in DeGarmo, and we started learning how to take a better approach to our talent strategies. We also added a new CEO in that time. Our new CEO had extensive experience in working with DeGarmo, and so we really had some strong guidance on the next steps on taking that approach and how to implement some of these practices. It was important for us to develop dashboards and the data to make data sound decision making surrounding authorization. We had really extensive clinical dashboards, but our family services dashboards were really minimal, and so we needed to expand on that so we can make some better decision makings moving forward. We had everybody, our ODCs, FSCs, and hospital services teams take the DeGarmo assessment. And it just helped us identify the strengths and weaknesses laid out in our current team. Where are we currently at with our team and how do they fall? We also identified the team. It also identified what we all knew, that our current team that we have in place, they do an exceptional job, and it showed that they have a high level of empathy, leading to a lot of concern for others and very little influence. And our clinical and hospital services teams had these, it kind of swapped and kind of had the ideal influence, the ideal stress tolerance levels, which were more consistent with those higher authorization rates. And so we met as a team to say, okay, how do we utilize this data and how do we strengthen our current team to then give them the foundation that they need to kind of increase those areas where, you know, they might be showing a little too much empathy or a little, or increase on providing a little more influence in their discussion. And so as we started working with our internal team, our HR team implemented the department process workflow into every applicant. So if you apply for these roles at Donor Connect, you are going to be presented right away with the assessment tool. And we've decided as an organization, especially with our family services team, that you have to be a moderate or higher to move on to an interview round. And so that was for us to be able to kind of target those prioritized behaviors. We then had our entire our FSC team work through the DeGarmo training. And so DeGarmo spent 3 to 4 hours sitting down with the team to help them better understand the assessment and their levels and what it meant and how it was measured. And so that was great. That was able to provide them deeper insight on, again, the why and the why we're working on these transitions. We did some further organizational restructuring to provide more support to our family services team, who are now supported by myself. We have a director of organ recovery, the manager, and we have a new FSC supervisor team. And so we also integrated the team into our clinical services team because they really just spend so much time together that we're looking at just, you know, working that into that integration. And in our organization, we call it tripod. And so the third leg of that tripod is hospital services. And so we're hoping, again, having that integration will feed off each other to help uplift and create more opportunity. And we also felt that this strategic alignment was really in alignment with what we were seeing from the DeGarmo research that came out in the 9,000 conversations that took place. You know, and we're starting to implement and put in the development planning guide. This gives the opportunity to do self-assessment. If you're in any of my meetings, you hear self-reflection all the time. We need to stop, have some self-reflection, look and make sure that we're meeting the needs and doing our best. And if we're not, let's adapt quickly and let's transition and let's get the resources that we need to feel uplifted. And so I think the development planning guide is going to help guide our teams both individually and the leaders for those teams to help them get to the point where we're putting the strongest foot forward. Our next steps for this is using data to help drive growth. You know, how do we use our authorization data again to help drive and uplift? We ensure all our recruitments are meeting the matrix laid out by DeGarmo. We trust the data. We want to trust the data moving forward and put that into implementation. We're trying to look for areas how to utilize potential high performers that aren't in the current FSC team. So we had hospital service personnel that scored very high. We had organ donation coordinators that scored very high. And so are there areas where they should be pulled into conversations or they should participate in conversations? And one thing we are doing is our hospital services team is implementing an in-house coordinator model. And again, where these applicants are going through the assessment and we're hiring the best applicants we think that might be able to facilitate a donation conversation if needed. And, you know, we're going to monitor and adapt. And as that adaptation, we haven't committed to a complete split of the two teams, but we've talked about, you know, maybe certain team members should only speak to registered donor. You know, we have a really high registration conversion rate. Maybe, you know, maybe that's the direction we head in, or do we create something that Kim and Clint have created where they have two separate pathways to support their hospitals and families? So, you know, that's kind of where we're at. We've built the foundation. We feel like we had the data structure and the understanding and the know-how. And now the next steps for us is to take this and put it into implementation. And so that's where we're at. You know, Anthony DeGarmo, thanks for giving me the opportunity to share kind of where we're at today, even though we're only probably like 5% into the growth development. But Donor Connect, we love collaboration. So those of you listening, please don't hesitate to reach out if you want to hear about some of the successes and struggles that we're going through, or we can work through helping us implement even further.
Thank you, Cam. That's great. And that's, again, just reinforcing, that's kind of the whole purpose of this forum, is to get people to open up and listen to these ideas, share experiences, maybe learn from mistakes, and try to figure out what the path forward looks like. There's the goal is, in my perspective, is incremental improvement. And so it's hard to take a major transformation like this and implement it in 3 months and expect it all to go perfectly. So there's going to be some struggles, some obstacles that need to be overcome. We need to continue to look at the data to better understand how to use it to make strategic decisions. And so I think we've got a really solid foundation from a data perspective. We've done a lot of research, and I feel like what the research suggested is what is showing up in practice at some level. So the work that we did, we thought there would be I wrote it down, 11% incremental improvement in the conversion of non-registered patients experiencing brain death, and 23% with DCDs, the non-registered DCDs. And so Kim's, actual findings are pretty close to that. So again, it takes a little while to get there. There's some struggles, and there's a lot of questions that are coming in. So this isn't the last time that we're gonna talk about this. I suspect that we're gonna have to do a follow-up at some point. So I'm going to encourage, again, everybody to continue to ask these questions, and we're going to try to get to all of them. We've got a couple of operational questions that I think you probably both can field. Kim, I think you specifically mentioned this, and I think somebody's just looking for a little bit more information. So when you split the roles into two different groups, you mentioned regrading the groups and kind of looking at them from a pay perspective. So did you, to the extent that you could talk about this publicly, did you do pay differently? Did anybody's pay get lowered? So what was kind of the outcome of that work?
Sure. So we did not lower anyone's pay. We made that when Clint and I talked about it, and Sarah, we determined that we were not going to do that from the beginning. And so when we did reclassify or regrade them, we did move the donation advocate into one pay grade up. So those that stayed in the donation advocate role did get a little bit. We assessed every individual with their current pay, their experience, and then adjusted their based on that and their role moving forward.
Okay, good. And then there was one more that I think was more, and then Cameron, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to not allow you opportunity to field that question. I don't know if you're at a point where you've made decisions about pay for splitting up the roles, or if that's still being considered. Can you talk about where you guys are there?
Yeah, no, Dominic and I really had to create the foundation of the team. We made some schedule changes. We went to 12-hour shifts from 24-hour shifts. And we've made it really clear to the teams that nothing's going to be a takeaway, and so in those changes, we had to make adjustments to adapt to that. And then moving forward, none of our changes will be a takeaway. Only our changes will just continue to promote further growth.
Okay, great. Kim, you had mentioned that you had some donor advocates that had some long days where they had 3 or more conversations with families. One of the questions was about authorization rates in those additional approaches. Are you looking at the data and that level of detail where you can see if there's a change in if it declines, if it's later in the day, or if they've had X number of conversations or more?
So it's a really interesting question, because it is something that we're working on getting reports for, so we can see, is there a difference? like you said, in the time of the day, after how many approaches, we have an authorization, what we call an authorization coach. So it's an AC that's on call 24/7, along with our AOC that answers more of the clinical questions. The AC is more there for donation conversations, family support, figuring out who legal next of kin is and such, or like any hospital issues. And so there are cases when someone has had multiple approaches a day. As you guys know, sometimes it's just giving a pep talk, telling them to get out of their own head if they've had a decline. We found more often, because the donation advocate is more tailored towards achievement and tailored towards being successful with, like, it's more of a challenge to them for the conversations. It's actually been motivating to them. Like when they get a yes, they're more confident going into the next conversation. Now, I will say on the flip side of that, when they have a no, we usually have a conversation. They're a little bit discouraged in talking through that. We are looking at some different ways we can maybe set up some smaller group meetings to discuss some of those declines like we've done in the past, and what we can do to help support them through that. But that is one thing we are looking at the data to really see if we can dig into that and kind of assess. But it's more on a personal basis now, where we're doing more conversations before that next approach, having, helping them kind of get out of their own headspace, and trying to help motivate them for the next one.
Great. Cameron, one came in, I think, specifically for you, but obviously, Kim, you can field this as well. And it has to do with reviewing the results of the assessments with staff. Did you have any negative reactions or feelings about the information, and how it impacted where you placed them in their roles? So I guess, did anybody disagree with the output, and how did that impact their ultimate placement?
So everybody's still currently placed in their current roles. We haven't made any adjustments yet. I think our initial goal was to take the initial assessment and grow from it and look for areas of opportunity. And then again, use the data of their current practice in conjunction with what we're seeing and see if the trend's the same. I think a lot of my conversations, because again, we rolled this out before I was in my role now, and now in my current role, I'm meeting with them individually to kind of talk about, what does this entail? What does it look like moving forward? And how do you feel? And where do you feel you fit in this? And so that's really what we're kind of doing, is just feeling it. And again, I've had some great conversations where coordinators have told me, they're like, oh, after learning this, I really think I can use more storytelling coaching. How do I get into a storytelling mode, or how can I work on transitioning, or how can I not freeze up at the first decline, or how do I transition out of closing questions, right? And so these are kind of the things that we've utilized for the data. I think once we feel that we've got the foundation in place and people feel adequately educated on our standardization, then we'll start to look at, okay, what does it mean now to have a family support team and an authorization team? And ultimately, will that be the direction we go in?
Yeah. And I guess to that point, we have a question that came in almost kind of directly related to that, and this whole notion of splitting the team into the family support versus donation advocate roles. Do you have anybody who you think is going to function in both capacities, that has kind of that behavioral range to effectively go back and forth and be able to provide an exceptional family support experience, and also, be able to advocate for donation?
Yeah, we definitely do. And I think the question of, what's family support and what's the level of family support, right? Is family support 24/7 bedside support? And is that a cross function between your organ coordinator on site or a family support coordinator? And so, because I think we can all agree that there's varying levels of support that's needed. And there are times when you don't need dedicated family support. The organ coordinator at bedside can definitely support those families through, changes in case times and things like that. But there's absolutely times when you're looking at rescinding or deep emotional concerns where you need to bring in that added support. So we definitely have identified, we have a handful of team members that have a long history of doing authorization, that are also organ donation coordinators, that can probably be blended in both roles. I think what'll be interesting for us, and I'm not sure if Kim experienced it, but we had a high number of our hospital support team members that scored really high on the assessment. And, how do we look at maximizing their skill set to maybe potentially fitting both roles? And that's where that in-house role for us is kind of come into play, is ensuring that we're hiring people with that high skill set or that high potential skill set in that in-house role to intervene, when that hand's on the tube, or, those ultra late referrals or whatever it might be.
Kim, what about you?
So we do have the in-house coordinator model as well that I mentioned. And so that person, the ones that are stronger with the donation advocate skills are the ones that we typically have doing those conversations. We have rerouted donation advocates back to a case when it's in more of that family support mode, because, there's talk about rescinding, or we have complex family dynamics. But a lot of our family support coordinators have a hospital social work background. And so they're used to doing a lot of that kind of support through those difficult families. And so we do try to send an additional person on site, whether it's another donation advocate or another family support, family service coordinators, just to have two people on site to help support, or if it's an in-house coordinator. But we do try to keep the roles separate, but just offer more support whenever there are difficult family dynamics or any kind of rescinding, talk. We try to get a donation advocate on site.
Good. Okay. In your response, you actually answered another question that just came in. So
okay.
One came in specifically related to the operational use of the assessment itself. And Cameron, I think you've already addressed this, where you said that you kind of prioritize candidates for interviews who are moderate or above, so moderate or stronger in terms of that band. And we have some folks looking for feedback for how you guys are using that. Kim, is it consistent with what Cameron is doing there, or do you guys have a different way of looking at that information?
No, it's very consistent. We look at like that 28 to 30 range on the very high end of that moderate scale. But we've had several people that are like scoring in the 40s. And so we try to look for that higher level, but we have interviewed people in that 28 to 30 range as well.
Okay. There was another operational question that I'll just field, because I can be prescriptive about this. And this is an issue related to reassessment of folks and whether you can do that and look for growth. And the answer is yes, absolutely. These are individual difference characteristics that are relatively stable over time, but the whole point is to help people understand how they can differently emphasize behaviors in a specific situation. Now, that change in behavior doesn't occur overnight. So we would not advocate for retesting on a monthly basis. I would say, biannually or annually, with the understanding that there's some concerted effort to try to make change. And then over time, you can see if those changes are actually showing up in their results. So absolutely retest, but I wouldn't do so too frequently, because I wouldn't expect to see changes that fast. Okay, we've got time for just a couple more. What are some of have there been very specific unintended outcomes of this that are either positive or negative when you kind of look at making this change? Like any other benefits or challenges where you're just like, I didn't see that coming, but that's great, or I didn't see that coming and that's really kind of a complication for us operationally?
I think for us, I would say there's definitely a cultural shift for us And I'm not surprised at how quickly the team has adapted to the idealization of the change, right? I think we have incredibly high growth mindset on our team. And they're passionate about what they do, and they're definitely opinionated on how we do it, which I love. I think it's great. But they also, again, have been able to step back and see areas of improvement and areas of growth. And so you had talked a little bit earlier about doing a second assessment. You know, we don't talk about that, but our team does a phenomenal job of handling very challenging, very difficult FPA challenge situations, which I would say are almost harder than a decline situation. And they work through those. And you need a high level of stress tolerance. You need a high level of influence to work through those, and being able to transition from that into maximizing our non-auth decline reasons. I think they're recognizing that there's an area of growth there. And you know, anytime we think there's going to be a cultural challenge, I think we get hesitant. But in this case, that hesitancy is falling away, and I'm really proud of the team and the areas that they want to improve. And I wouldn't say I was surprised by it, but I'm excited by it.
Kim, anything there?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to add besides what I said earlier, which we should have realized this, and I think we did halfway through, but the family support coordinators are out a lot more overnight than the donation advocates. We just don't have a lot of family conversations in the middle of the night past, midnight to 6 a.m. It's just a few a month, really. And so, but a lot of our ORs are scheduled overnight. And so when we initially looked at increasing staff, we looked at increasing the donation advocates because we have the extra family support with our in-house coordinators throughout the day. But what we're seeing is that they're not getting that extra support overnight because currently we do not have any of the in-house coordinator staff in one of our metro areas. So trying to just kind of navigate that. And then the only other thing I would add is really how to have meetings on a consistent basis that are discussing, because you are going to have those family support coordinators that are still talking to families. So they still need to be trained, or they still need to be briefed on anything dealing with authorization and family services as a whole. But then also we're splitting it up into two groups to have like a lot of conversations about family support and what they're seeing, and donation conversations and what they're seeing, and having a smaller intimate group to where they can really discuss and dig down to what they could do better, and getting advice from their colleagues that are also good with donation conversations. But then it kind of leaves the family support group out of it. And so we're in the process now of trying to figure out what looks best and what will help support them the most without having so many meetings on their calendar that they have to attend. And so really trying to navigate that and finding a good balance on that to make sure they feel supported.
Good. Let's see if we have time for one more. We're really running short on time. Here's one that came in. Maybe it's something that we can address relatively quickly. Outside of authorization rates, do you have performance metrics that you find helpful to evaluate, develop, and or motivate authorization and or family support staff? This is an area we're currently exploring that we would love to hear ideas from others on. So any other performance metrics that you're using outside of authorization?
I hope this helps, but we definitely break down every single decline code and what are the primary decline codes, and then what are the things that fall within those decline codes that we can help address. And so, for us, a big one with our DSA and our staffing was timing, right? Family declines around timing, and also providing the resources to the team to be able to never say no to timing, to always have the yes to, we can accommodate something, whether it's in 2 hours or whether it's 72 hours, they have the resources to say yes to that. And then when we start looking at the other factors around decline, whether it's previous patient wishes known or unknown patient wishes known, we start looking into the other matrix that are within there around referral timing, around, how did the end of life conversations go, those kind of things, and was everything in place for them to succeed just in the initial best practices of leading up to a conversation. Once we identified, if we see a higher area of another within a hospital, we start to put in kind of strategies to kind of improve that area there. But, I think this is from Clint. Clint, I'm more than happy to chat, offline or another venue on some other areas to get more inner detail into that, to being able to help them improve authorization or help them lead to seeing more opportunities to get those yeses.
Great, thank you. We're just about out of time. I want to be sensitive to everybody. You might have another meeting to get to, and I most importantly want to thank Kim and Cameron for the time and effort that they put into preparing and presenting their experiences and sharing them with you today. Thank you all for attending, and we'll look to schedule another event in April on a different topic. We're going to be sending out a survey to you all following this session to get your feedback and to use that information to try to put together another compelling session like today. So again, thank you, and we'll be sending that survey out shortly. Cameron, I know you're heading out to South Africa pretty soon to finish things up with your MBA, so have a great trip, and we'll look forward to connecting once you get back. So thanks, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.